Welcome to Web Marketing That Works, episode 31. My name's Toby Jenkins, and today on the show we have our friend and super blogger, Jeff Bullas. Now, Jeff, if you don't know his credentials, then they're pretty impressive. So here's just a fraction of what he's done. He's been ranked number 8 on Forbes' World's Top 40 Social Marketing Talent. He's been published in the New York Times. He's been on Huffington Post's Top 100 Business Leadership and Technology Twitter accounts you must follow. He's the author of an Amazon bestseller as well. Jeff is genuinely a powerhouse in social media and on the web. And it was awesome to catch up with him again on the show today. My favorite quote from the show was, if you want to be a leader, you need to create. The art of creation crystallizes your thinking and helps you structure your thoughts. And really, Jeff goes into so much detail today, not just about that creation process, but also then once you've created your content, how you then go into sharing. And to me, that's what Jeff has done exceptionally well. And I'd really encourage you to take as many lessons as you can from today's show. Today's show is brought to you by the 33 free web marketing templates that come with Web Marketing That Works. So if you'd like to download those, they're available at bluewiremedia.com.au/book. And please enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Web Marketing That Works podcast. Come behind the scenes of real-life marketing experiments and listen in as amazing guests confess the truth about what really works. Now, here are your hosts, Adam Franklin and Toby Jenkins.
It's my great pleasure to introduce our guest and super blogger today, Jeff Bullas. A little bit of background on Jeff. He has a list of remarkable achievements. So listen to a couple of these ones. He's ranked number 8 on Forbes' World's Top 40 Social Marketing Talent this year. He's been published in the New York Times. Huffington Post has said that Jeff's Twitter account is one of the top 100 business, leadership and technology Twitter accounts you must follow. And he's also the author of an Amazon bestseller called Blogging the Smart Way, How to Create and Market a Killer Blog with Social Media. So Jeff, thanks so much for joining us on the show today.
It's a pleasure, Toby.
We actually first met in that interview in your office in 2011 to find out how you'd attracted 47,000 Twitter followers, and you've cranked up a few more since then, Jeff. So really appreciate you joining us for this round as well.
It's a pleasure. Yeah, it's great to catch up then. So this is like 3 years later. So
and things have really changed for you. So I'm really interested to hear what does a day in the life of Jeff Bullas look like at the moment.
It's normally an early start, so I get up and get the blog out then. I have guest bloggers, sometimes editing, sometimes it's writing. So, and then the day is done responding to some emails, more writing, meetings, and a variety of fun. So I'm involved with some startups, also do affiliate work, just putting together my second book, which I hope to get out by Christmas. So that's
great.
Also part of the mix. So
what's that going to be about?
Looking at doing, it's basically the lessons I've learned regarding how to succeed in business and life in a digital world, because I think what I've discovered is that a lot of people, leaders and so on, are still trying to grapple how they work in this very fast-changing, evolving landscape of, digital marketing and, online commerce and so on. So that's the area I'm going to focus on. So it's so that's what it's going to be about.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That'll be an interesting extension of the first book then.
Yeah, I want to go a little bit beyond more just a how-to. It will be, tips, but I suppose more laying the groundwork and providing perspective and hopefully some inspiration for, how things have changed and then how to adapt and evolve to this, new paradigm.
Yeah. Okay. So, is there a particular let's dig into that a bit. If you're happy to talk about it, is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. So, what's sort of the philosophy behind the book then? Do you feel?
I think it's the challenges that a lot of business people face. So, because a lot of them, grew up in an age of mass media and, before mobile phones and before the internet, and they're really struggling. So especially, business leaders, even marketers, come across those that, a lot of us, in their 40s, 50s and 60s and still got lots of ideas and they've been doing things a certain way, but those have been turned on its head. So it's really it's really a reinvention of business, and sometimes even life, because it's actually very different to what it was 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, right. And what sort of themes are coming out as you're writing about the success components of it?
Oh, it's the importance of online content. It's the importance of crafting and creating that. It's the importance of building online connections rather than just face-to-face connections. So it goes in a whole range of quite a few different I suppose topic points that I've found to be pain points for people.
Yep. Oh, that's really interesting, and that's sort of based on your consulting work, is it, Jeff?
Oh, it's involved what I've learned in terms of the blogging, the writing, the creating, and being immersed in a digital world. So it's essentially what I've heard back from people, and also my experiences and insights that I've gained by being focused and participating in this digital age.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds great. I'll look forward to let us know when that comes out, Jeff, and we'll get you back on to Spruik the book.
No problem.
And so in terms of your marketing philosophy then, and I mean, you've been an incredibly prolific blogger, and certainly one of the highest profile bloggers in Australia and obviously globally as well. What has been your sort of online or web marketing philosophy then?
The philosophy evolved because initially it started from being curious, because I saw people were obsessed with social media and Facebook and then Twitter. And so the philosophy, though, that emerged was one of helping people solve problems. So it became very much an educational style blog. So I suppose it was driven in part by my, because I trained as a teacher. So I think it came out of, my past experiences and education. And so the blog sort of evolved from that curiosity.
Right. And that, I mean, certainly, solving problems, the likes of David Mim and Scott and, a lot of the high-profile web marketers, I guess, talk about the importance of solving problems and, the fact that selling has changed from being about sort of controlling the information to being the one who's sharing the information and educating.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, that's been your experience as well?
Yeah, well, David, there was actually 3 inspirations for me starting the blog, and David Mim and Scott's book, The New Rules of Marketing and PR, was one of the key inspirations for me to actually get involved in starting the blog. And that gave me some insights that just resonated with me, because I was over the old types of marketing, which is like a lot of push, and all about flogging product and services. And so the book resonated with me. And then there was another book which is about, I suppose, adapting to a digital world and creating a digital life that works for people. And that was Tim Ferriss's The 4-Hour Workweek.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that was another inspiration. And a third inspiration, which I suppose pushed me over that edge, was I can't remember the blog post. I wish I actually was able to find it. I went looking for it a while back, but there's a blog post on HubSpot, which is another resource I discovered online. And it said, if you've got just an inkling of what you want to start a blog about, just start. So, and that really resonates with me. In fact, it's something I would recommend to anyone is actually art. Just start. You might not have a perfectly clear vision, and most of the times you don't. You have an idea, and you can't test the idea until you actually start. So they're the 3 inspirations for me when I started the blog. Yeah,
right. Yeah, I mean, certainly they have been huge influences on us as well, David, Mim and Scott and Ferriss, as well as HubSpot. So that's really interesting to hear you say that, Jeff. And so what was it one of those particular books that really sort of tipped you over the edge into blogging, or, what was the process for you to actually get started?
It was that blog post by HubSpot that said, if you just got an inkling, start. So I did, because it made sense, because I wasn't sure. I just knew social media was interesting. I was very curious about it. I saw the power of it, because people were obsessed by, as I mentioned earlier. So this obsession said to me that there's going to be some power in this. And 5.5 years later, Facebook, I think, what started was 50 million. Now it's approaching 1.5 billion. It's Twitter's huge. They've all gone public. So it was, I suppose, a bit of a gut feel of momentum and what was happening online, and I was fascinated by it. So that's why I wanted to almost be a participant in that momentum.
Yeah, that's great. And so what, how did you actually get started? I mean, did you, like literally in terms of installing a WordPress blog, or where did you kick off?
Yeah, I actually got my domain name. So that was one of my first steps. And then I started the blog with that domain name on WordPress.com, which enabled me to use my domain name still, but I was restricted by the limitations of WordPress.com, which I then changed about 12 months later into a self-hosted blog with my domain name. But I think the fact that one of the decisions I made, I think that I'm thankful for, was actually start the blog with my own domain name, not something like blogger.com/Jeff Bullas. So it gave me control of my online brand, and that's what I'd recommend to anyone, is you really need to build up your owned assets, such as your blog or a website that is in your domain name and self-hosted, rather than handing it over to, just having a Facebook page or being on Blogger. So that was very important. I think I didn't get it perfect, but I got some of the fundamentals right, which gave me control.
Interesting, because this is, I guess this is a common discussion that we certainly have around this idea of, your owned assets versus, what's at the will and whimsy of the social media platforms, because the social media platforms are enormously powerful, as you say. But then, where do you sort of draw the distinction between what's owned versus, and where, I guess, did you make that realization that, you really needed to own your content as well?
It came from my reading of what I call the other top bloggers, such as Darren Rouse in Australia, as we both know.
Yep.
And so what I did is I took a lot of the advice that I saw, the key elements from, the top guys in the industry at the time, the top people, and I, wove that into what I created. So that was very important. And how I participate is I make sure that I create the best content I can that's on my platforms, and then I use social media to actually have the engagement and share that content out. So I treat, it's a hub and spoke model to me. Basically, the blog is my hub, and my social media channels are my spokes that I use to distribute. They're my ambassadors that actually share my content. So it's engaging the power of the crowd and your advocates to actually share your content. And that basically crowdsources your marketing, and that's where social media is very powerful. So, and as you build tribes and followers on social networks, that's where you actually go into what's known as earned media. And that's where you're earning attention online, you're growing tribes, followers, and fans on your social networks. And as you engage with them and as you create the best content you can, they actually then share your content on your behalf while you sleep, and without you actually having to beg or ask. So it's very powerful, and it basically multiplies your effort.
If we can dive into some marketing experiments then, Jeff, and the things that you've learned, what has worked well for you? What hasn't worked well? Have there been any catastrophes? So if we can just kick off with what you think has worked really well for you online.
Twitter's been great because it's been unfiltered. So I actually used Twitter early on and decided that I really wanted to grow followers on Twitter. So I use the law of reciprocation to follow people within my target market. So I followed the followers of different bloggers and that in my industry. And when you follow someone, there's sort of like this reciprocation to follow back. So and they'll check you out and they'll say, okay, look, let's go and check his website or blog out. They're going, oh, he's got some decent content there, so let's follow him. So that's been, Twitter's been a huge distribution platform, engagement platform for me. Facebook, not so much, but it's still been good. But as it's wound back, its organic reach, and to make people pay to play, then you've got to use Facebook. It's more about paying, sponsoring your post to actually get the reach that you might have earned over the last few years by building a following on Facebook. So I maybe didn't upgrade my blog early enough to a self-hosted platform because it started to have trouble handling traffic. It wasn't a disaster, but I did notice some people saying that they couldn't access it very easily, or it wasn't loading when the peak emails went out. Another mistake I made was not building my email list from day one, which again is about owning your distribution as much as you possibly can online. Because by having your own email list, people will actually subscribe to your email. That gives you the ability to reach them in your own time without the rules changing, such as they changed on Facebook and other platforms. So that was one mistake I did do, and I've rectified since. So very important to build your own email list. So making sure you've got as much control as you possibly can of your owned channels.
Yeah, and so you consider your blog and your email list as your owned channels?
Correct, yep.
Is there anything else that you'd include in that?
Content. Content is yours.
Yep.
So, and that includes images, videos, PowerPoints and SlideShare.
Yep.
Content is what you own. So you need to be building up your own digital assets online. That's very, very important. And with building that up, it does take time. So you can accelerate the process by paying for attention online, but then it costs money, and that's fine. But a lot of small businesses don't have big budgets for actually advertising. So middle to larger companies, sure, they've got a budget, maybe needs to be reallocated into targeted social media marketing or Facebook or Google AdWords or so on. But a lot of smaller businesses, if you don't have the budget, then you have to make the time.
Yeah, and actually, this is a really interesting point. This was a question that I did really want to ask, which is this idea of creating versus consuming. Mm-hmm. And to me, you're a prolific creator of content, and I guess 99% of the web are huge consumers of content.
Yeah.
At what point did you was it when you got? Or hang on, let me rephrase that. How do you sort of divide your consumption versus creation time in terms of how you see the content?
I don't have any ratios, but I discovered that if you want to be a leader, you need to create. And also the art of creation crystallizes your thinking and helps you structure your thoughts. And out of that comes more inspiration. So I think the art of creating and getting feedback online is a very powerful synergy. And I noticed that, so I continue to create content. In fact, I think for 200 days or more, 1 year, I actually didn't miss, I think, a day and during my weekdays. I was creating content 5 days a week. And I think, that's hard to do, but it means you sometimes might have to get up early or stay up late to actually create that content. And it's not always about creating it. It could be just curating it. It could be, collecting, here's the top 5, blog posts on content marketing and put them into a list post. So you don't have to create all the content yourself, but what you want to do is actually, put content in a format that's easy to read and consume, that adds value to readers' lives. It might be just by saving them time by putting it all in one location. But it's really important to create your content, and that then can position you as a thought leader in your industry over time as you add value to people's lives. And on top of that, you do need to be sharpening the sword. So you need to be constantly reading. And there's a great quote by Stephen King: if you want to be a writer, if you want to write a lot, you need to read a lot. And that is so true. So you need to be feeding your own soul and mind with what I call inspiring other creators, whether it's a good book offline or whether it's a an ebook online, or whether it's great blog posts. So I got a lot of great blog posts pushed to me. Google Reader doesn't exist anymore, but there's some other ones that have taken up that mantle, such as Feedly. So you can actually put different categories of content into folders, if you like, on Feedly, and that will push. You can go and visit Feedly every day, and receive inspiration from some of the top blogs in the world in a categorized and organized format. So you need to be doing both. You need to be both a creator and a consumer, and because gathering ideas and insights from other leaders globally is a really important part of it. And you find that the top artists and the top musicians are constantly listening to great music and or consuming or watching great art, because creativity and insights and inspiration do not happen in a vacuum.
Yeah, for sure. And so if we get just a little bit of nitty gritty on your creation and perhaps creative process as well, like how frequently do you create? Is there a particular ritual that you get into? Are there certain times that you look at writing, your posts and curating your content? Are there particular structures that you use in your week to manage that process?
Yeah, I have the habit of getting up quite early, and generally it's around about 4:30. And that gives me what I call my time to actually create. There is, as you could imagine, there's very little distractions at 4:30.
Yeah.
So I typically will turn my Twitter feed off. I don't answer any emails. If I have a blog post I'm creating for that day, that's what I focus on. And that gives me a dedicated time that is very free of interruptions. So you're not going to get phone calls. You're not going to have people knocking on your door. I call it my time. And I think that's really important to create what I call your space and time. So it needs to be both maybe a physical space. And I have, my blogging station, which is a dual screen setup. So I've got a big screen and also my laptop. And that means I can create easily, flip between screens, and actually that helps me a lot with the writing process. And also then during the day, I might see in my reading or coming across things, I might get inspiration. I might be in the middle of a conversation with someone in a meeting, say, excuse me, I just got to write that, inspiration down. It might be a blog post heading or a, title for a new book that you might be thinking about. So you've got to seize that moment. I've been known to actually stop the car and, write down an idea and interrupt the conversation. So, because the thing about inspiration is sometimes it just moves on. And if you miss that, moment of capture, then it's almost like you've, lost something that could have been rather exciting. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. And so is your target, one post a day in terms of frequency or, volume of content, and how has that changed over your blogging career?
Early on, I got to a point where I said I'm just going to create one every day, 5 days a week. I did do weekends a bit, but I said I needed to give myself some time. You've got to create a life as well, so it's not just about blogging, of course. Sure. But I think once you reach a certain velocity, you can back off a bit. Some other bloggers, such as Tim Ferriss, don't blog as often, but they create just really deep, long-form content, and that might only be once a week. So there's no right or wrong on this. You can, but you've got to put together what I call not fluffy content. It's got to be, insightful. It's got to be interesting to read. It's got to provide information that maybe, the average consumer or reader doesn't come across. It could be an angle. So, it's really important to, reach what I call cruising altitude. So sometimes to, break through into people's mind space, especially on a very crowded web with nearly 1 billion websites, is to actually, you're going to have to operate on full throttle for a bit to break through. And then once you reach cruising altitude, yes, sure, you can, maybe back off a bit. But, there's different tactics to do it, which, and different people operate different ways. So, but you do need to be creating content on a consistent and persistent basis.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, Jeff, that's Unreal, thanks. I really appreciate you sort of breaking that down. And actually, one further question in terms of your sort of daily habit. The get up at 4:30. When do you do you take that through to 7:30, 8:30? How long do you allow for Jeff time?
I'd like to if I don't get it out by 9 a.m., I'm a bit frustrated. So the aim is typically to try and get the blog post done by 7:30. That allows me then the next stage, which is after hitting the publish. Well, before I do the publish button, I optimize it for search engines. That's really important. So I use a plugin called Yoast, which is a great SEO plugin.
We use the same.
Yep.
I'll put that in the show notes as well. All the links and resources that you talk about, I'll make sure are in the show notes.
So it's optimized for search engines, and then once it's published, then the next step is actually promoting it and distributing it. So then it goes out to all my major channels. So that includes Twitter. It's tweeted. It's then flipped into Flipbook. I've found Flipboard magazines are driving traffic now. People like to consume content in a very visual format, and Flipboard magazines, because you can create your own Flipboard magazines now. It's been out about the last 6 to 9 months. I've found that actually sometimes drives more traffic than Facebook. Then I also share it to Facebook. I also share it to LinkedIn. I also then share it to Pinterest. So I pin the image to Pinterest. And then also I distribute it to my email subscribers. So you've got to get your content to all the different places that most of your readers, are hanging out at, and also Google+. So it's not about just creating the content; it's about marketing, promoting it. So you got to hustle your content.
Yep. Can I ask a question then for the listeners? Do you take each blog post and send it through that entire cycle?
Yes.
In terms of email, Flipboard, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Pinterest, say.
Yep.
You go through, so every time that gets sent out as a single article?
Yes.
And then do you provide summaries regularly as well, or is it just article by article?
It's just article by article. There is consideration. What I might do is actually might do some summaries on weekends. I might even do that. So that's a consideration. I also might be looking at repurposing some of my blog posts in more visual formats, such as SlideShare.
Yep.
So that's, it's important to actually go through that ritual.
Mm. One other question then, Jeff. One thing I have noticed is, and I don't think it's unique to you, but that you retweet. Sorry, you don't retweet, but you tweet again your posts. So
Yep.
Do you sort of put that into a content flow? What tools do you use to do that?
Yeah. When I do a blog post, that first day it will get tweeted 4 or 5 times. Because you've got to think of Twitter not as an inbox, because a lot of people think it's like an inbox like an email. It's not. It's actually a stream. So what you've got to do is you've got to keep tossing that content to the stream. So the first day after you've tweeted it once, you need to retweet several times. So I do that. Then I also use a platform called Social Oomph that allows me to create recurring tweets. And what I try and do with my content, a lot of it's what I call evergreen. So it's content that's going to be relevant in 2 years' time as it is today. So you won't find a lot of my blog posts will be about the latest news. There might be some of the latest social media statistics and facts, but I'm typically not writing about breaking news. I'll leave that to the Huffington Post and the Mashables. That's fine. But I'm about creating evergreen content. And that was something I learned off Tim Ferriss. And I think that's really important because then you can keep retweeting that on a regular basis. So I use Social Oomph to actually retweet my content. So I will not replicate a tweet for 6 or 7 days. So it's important. And that works for me in terms of, where my blog sits. If you're doing another style of blog, it mightn't work exactly that way for you, but it's trying to find some rhythm and a means to add value that keeps you top of mind and in people's Twitter streams and on Facebook and so on.
Yep, for sure. And so Can I flip that? So that's how you handle your content. How do you go about with your content curation process?
In terms of putting together blog posts?
Yeah, putting together blog posts, or do you share other people's tweets and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I have about 25 other bloggers that I share their content daily. So, but I've automated that. So it's basically they're trusted bloggers that I know just put out great content all the time. So, likes of Seth Godin or Chris Brogan or Lee Odden, those guys. Mark Schaefer. What happens is that I use a platform that is RSS driven. So as soon as it notices a blog is actually published, it then retweets that blog post. And I also let them know through using an app mention so they know that I've actually retweeted it. So I found it to be very effective. And also that means I'm sharing other people's content, not just my own as well.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, that's awesome, Jeff. Thank you. Because I think, you are extremely active online, and I think that gives a bit of a breakdown for people looking to sort of step up their activity as well as to manage that step up, because I think that's a big issue for a lot of people, is how do they manage increasing their output without dramatically increasing their workload as well. So
that's a very important question. And a lot of people do struggle with that. And there's a great phrase that's emerged in the industry over the last couple of years, actually. And it's called doing social at scale. And that's the challenge. With social, there's so many moving parts. So you do need to do some form of automation. So there are a whole range of platforms that have emerged over the last 2 or 3 years. When I started, there was, you had to hunt for these raw tools that did some of it well, whereas now some of the platforms that have emerged allow you to actually scale your efforts through automation, which if increasingly crowded web, that is really essential. So you can't be cobbling together just a few bunch of tools, especially if you're mid to large corporate. So you're finding some of the big end of town, such as IBM, Adobe, Oracle, are basically stitching together and creating platforms that allow people to do social at scale, from organic and earned right through to paid advertising through their social media and digital marketing platforms.
Yep. And any particular, so you've mentioned Social Oomph that you use. Are there other tools that you'd recommend?
If you want, there's a tool that I use for following followers of other users, which is called Tweepy. I found that's quite clean and easy to use. These are more tools aimed at, I suppose, the individual consultant or blogger or small business, because they mightn't have the money to spend $1,000 or $2,000 a month on a platform that automates their efforts. But so there's some of them that I use.
Yeah, no, great. That's excellent. Thank you. So Jeff, look, I mean, we've really gone into a lot of detail there, and I really appreciate you sharing all of that. Are there other areas that you feel, have we missed anything in terms of? I mean, I know that's a big question too, but have we missed anything in terms of this sort of area in terms of taking your content and then sharing it? Are there any gaps that you feel we've missed in this discussion so far?
I think what we've missed is in the content creation side.
Okay.
So when you're writing for the web, you've got to make it what I call snackable and easy to consume. And that means structuring your content. I think that's missed by a lot of people. I turn up to some blog posts and they're just a wall of text. And if you talk to almost anyone, when they see that, they go, I don't have time to read this. I don't know where the insights are. So you've got to structure your content. And also got to make it enticing. So you've got to start with the headline. You've got to use an enticing first sentence. You've got to keep the first paragraph or two interesting as well. And then you need to make sure that you do subtitling. So you draw people into the article, and then bullet points and numbers. And that's really important because, on the web, people aren't buying your content. Initially, you're actually offering free content. So there's no commitment. You're one click away from oblivion if you're boring them. So the reality is that you've got to make your content as easy to consume as possible and as enticing as possible. So content structure is really, really important, from headline right through to the bullet points. And I'll use another Stephen King illustration. He said that when people read something, it's got to look fluffy. In other words, it's not dense writing that is hard to actually get the inspiration and insights out of. So, and that applies, to fiction as well as non-fiction.
Yep. And then, I guess that's a real art in itself, is taking, what you were saying, great and useful insights, and making it appear fluffy without being fluffy, right?
Fluffy, I mean by how it looks, not by what it says.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Good. Just to clarify that.
Yeah, I'm glad we got that sorted.
Yep.
There's a great book by Stephen King, which I think everyone as a blogger, especially if they're creating written content, is called On Writing, and it's the only non-fiction book I believe Stephen King, the fiction writer, has written. So he wrote it in 1997.
Wow.
It's 300 pages. You can get it on Kindle. First 100 pages is about his passion for writing, which is worth a brilliant read. You can see that his journey, which is just astounding. And then the next 200 pages is what he calls his writing toolbox. And it's a book that I would recommend to anyone.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you. I'll have to jump onto that one. Okay, then Jeff, really appreciate all that. Final thoughts, or sort of what's next for you? What's on the horizon?
We're doing a range of things. So, but I'm trying to stay true to what I'm good at and what I enjoy doing. So I think that way I stay on purpose. But basically, the theme hasn't changed. It's still, adding value to people's lives online and helping to them and their journeys. And I'm developing more premium content, such as books, online courses in social media marketing, content marketing, and also monetizing the platform. So, the aim is to make the journey enjoyable and make a difference to people's lives at the same time.
Awesome. That's a great perspective on it all. And finally, how can people connect with you?
You can go to my blog, jeffbullas.com, or you can follow me on Twitter, which is just Jeff Bullas, JEFFBULLAS, or you can just Google me. I'll be there.
Indeed, you will. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. I really appreciate you sharing all those insights there. Some incredible detail for our listeners, and really appreciate your time. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Stay curious.
Thanks so much for joining us today for the podcast with Jeff. Hope you enjoyed it. Please remember to head on over to bluewiremedia.com.au/book if you're keen to download those 33 free web marketing templates. There's quite a number of which relate to blogging, so please help yourself. Otherwise, look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks very much.